Guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hi, my name is Caitlin Elliott, and I cover true crime cases on Tuesdays and Thursdays, with my recent cases to be on Tuesdays and my vintage cases to be on Fridays. So in my last video, we actually talked about the unsolved murder of Elsie Parobeck, and today I'm going to be covering the unsolved murder of Stephanie Crowe, and let me just tell you guys, this is a wild case. It is, honest to God, possibly the craziest case that I have ever heard of, and it's just so mind-blowing and so frustrating, and this case makes me so mad. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the case, and I hope you guys stick around for the video because it is going to be a very long, intense, and wild ride, so please just stick around and let me know. So Stephanie Ann Crowe, she was born on April 12th of 1985, and she was the middle child of 3 children. She had an older brother, and she had a younger sister. So her parents' names were Sheryl Crowe and Stephen Crowe, and this was not to be confused with the singer named Sheryl Crowe. That's a totally different other person. But she had her older brother named Michael and her younger sister named Shannon, and along with their parents, they all lived in a town called Escondido, California. Escondido is a town that is in San Diego County and is 30 miles away from the city of San Diego itself and 40 miles away from the Mexican border. I think it's Escondido, sorry. Escondido, sorry. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. It was said that Escondido had little to no crime back in the year of 1998, and it still really has 0 to 2 crimes a year, if that. So Stephanie, like I said, she had an older brother named Michael and a younger sister named Shannon, and she was a member of her local church choir, and she even volunteered quite often at the Escondido Library. I'm going to be pronouncing that name wrong the whole time. I'm so sorry, guys. She was 12 years old when she was violently and brutally murdered in her own bedroom. So, the family, they went to bed on the evening of January 20th of 1998, around 9 p.m. that night. And Michael, he was 14 years old at the time, and he was actually sick with the flu, and he had a temperature of 101. And this is extremely important to remember, so please remember that Michael did have the flu this day. According to official documents, Sheryl Crowe, she actually stated that she could not sleep until 11 p.m. that night. Both Sheryl and Stephen recalled telling the police that they had heard these thumping sounds, but they really didn't think anything of it. They just assumed that it was the sisters may have been sharing a bed, or maybe they went into Michael's room because they were having a nightmare. At 6:30 p.m. the following morning, Stephanie's grandmother goes into her bedroom to wake her up for school, and this is when the grandmother stumbled upon Stephanie's lifeless body laying in front of her doorway, making it very difficult to fully open the door. Stephanie had been violently stabbed 9 times with a knife, and her murder made absolutely no sense to the family. She was a very well-liked little girl, and nobody ever had any problems with her. So who could have been this hateful to have done this to her? Nobody in the family could understand that, piece together what exactly could have happened. So they went through some very intense grief and shock over what happened to Stephanie. Obviously, it was very brutal, and what was extremely bizarre about her murder was that it occurred during the time where the entire family had been in the house and had been sleeping, and nobody heard a scream, anyone coming into the house, nobody heard a thing. I could not find if her grandmother had actually been living with the family or if she was just there to help out with the kids when they would go to school, but she was not, it was said that she was not there that night. None of the family members even heard someone breaking in, nor did they even hear Stephanie screaming. So the family, they obviously called the police to report Stephanie's murder, and once the police got involved, this was when the case took a very dark turn, and y'all better buckle in because let me just tell you, it's gonna be a wild ride, a very wild ride. Y'all better be ready for this. So when the police arrived at the Crowe family home to investigate, they started to check for any signs of break-in because, of course, they wanted to see if there was anything happening and see if anyone had actually broken into the home. Like, who could have done this to Stephanie? So after they searched the home, they realized that there was no sign, according to them, that anyone had broke into the home, and there was no sign of forced entry. However, all of the family's doors and windows to the home had been left unlocked and opened for easy access for anybody to come in. So it made it very difficult. So I can't really say anything about the family leaving everything open and unlocked. They could have lived in a very safe neighborhood. They could have felt protected, you know. You never really know. Sometimes I leave my doors, you know, and windows occasionally, you know. But I can't really say anything about that. So when the police checked Stephanie's room that day, they realized that Stephanie's bedroom window had been unlocked, and there was a screen that had been covering the window, and it had been removed and pulled back to the point where it actually came completely off and it was on the roof. So, however, due to the lack of dirt on the window, police claimed that the window could not have been touched. They were like, well, there's no way because of all the dirt here. They continued to search the home to see if there was any type of clues or evidence as to what could have happened to Stephanie. And they realized that there had been a door that had been left open and unlocked in the family home. And this specific door was a sliding glass door, but her parents claimed that they did not hear it open. It's possible that the intruder did not come in the home through that door. And this door was in the bedroom of her parents' bedroom. There was actually a door that was by the garage that led into the family home that was also left unlocked, along with an open and unlocked window or door that had led directly into Stephanie Crowe's bedroom. Even though the house had been searched and they found no sign of an intruder had entered the home, no screens pried back, nothing had been stolen of value, there had been nothing that had been broken. There were 3 different ways for an intruder to easily get into the family's home. Like, it was not rocket science, is what I'm saying. Like, it was so obvious of what had happened here, but the police weren't putting 2 and 2 together, if you know what I mean. So what's super weird is that the murder weapon had not been left behind, nor was there even a knife at the crime scene. So whoever had done this was obviously very skilled at murdering people and knew exactly what the hell they were doing. Authorities, they quickly figured, or theorized, as I should say, that this murder had to have been an inside job, which basically means that it had to be someone who knew the family or was living with them at the time. So this was when the case started to take a very dark turn. Wait till y'all hear this. So the police, they find out that the older brother, 14-year-old Michael, had actually been awake around 4 in the morning that day, and he would have walked past Stephanie's room to get to the bathroom to get ready for the day, and he would have noticed her body laying in the doorway. However, in my personal opinion, it's possible that Michael was just too focused on getting Tylenol because remember he had a flu and he was just too sick or just wasn't really paying attention to what exactly could have happened. Whatever the case may be, I can't really say it's his fault for not noticing, because sometimes, you know, if it's really early, I know for me personally, if it's really early, I don't pay attention to anything. I just do my business, go to the bathroom, get some water, go back to bed. That quick. I don't pause to see what's been going on. That's it. So, again, this isn't confirmed of what could have happened, that he didn't really notice that she'd been laying there dead, but that's just my theory or opinion. Once Michael got his Tylenol, he walked back into his room and went back to bed. However, Michael's comment actually about getting the Tylenol actually didn't line up with what detectives believed to have been Stephanie's time of murdering, to the timeline of what could have happened. So because of this really caused reporters to start attacking the poor family. Every family member was then escorted by police into the police station to have some intense questioning. Even the grandmother and little 10-year-old Shannon. Police then strip searched the whole family, which means you take off your clothing and everything, and they started taking pictures of the family in their underwear. And as they were searching the clothes, they were trying to see if anyone had DNA evidence of Stephanie's blood on their clothes. Authorities then tell the family that they are not allowed to go back into their home because it is now a crime scene. And they believe that her murder was an inside job. Their parents were put into protection while 14-year-old Michael and 10-year-old Shannon were then sent to a local shelter, and this shelter was used to protect children from dangerous parents. The police at some point are 100% convinced that someone in the Crowe family had to have murdered Stephanie. And of course, they didn't have any information or clues that could have made them think about this. They just felt so strongly that someone in the family had to have done this to Stephanie. For 2 days, the family was nonstop and very thoroughly questioned by police about what had happened to Stephanie. The parents were not even aware that both Shannon and Michael were being questioned. And now remember, Shannon is 10, Michael is 14. They're minors. In order to be questioned, you have to have an adult with you at all times. The police, if they were legit officers or whatever, they would have known this. So it just seemed like to me that they were just kind of BSing that, threw it out the window, just wanted to get everything done that they could. Basically, that's what I thought. So poor Michael, he ended up being constantly brought back and forth between the shelter and the police station to be questioned about Stephanie's murder. And this was done without any of the parents' knowledge. They didn't even know Michael was doing this. Along with all this happening, Michael did not have a lawyer present with him whenever he was being questioned about Stephanie's murder. After a few days of very intense questioning, Michael becomes the prime suspect in his sister's murder case. And he was still a minor at this time. He was 14 years old. What's really weird to me is that even though Michael was a minor at this time, the police never even thought to ask permission from his parents to question him, nor did they even read him his Miranda rights like they did for the rest of the family. I mean, they read the Miranda rights for the parents, the younger sister, but for Michael, he was never read his Miranda rights, which if you don't know, if you don't read them, it can just screw up everything, and you technically could, you know, even if you were guilty and they didn't read you those Miranda rights, you could possibly get the case thrown out. So while interrogating Michael, the San Diego police instantly declared that he was definitely guilty of something because he had been distant and preoccupied as to what the police officers had been quoted saying. Distant and preoccupied. When his sister's case was being investigated, this is what he was said to have been, like, distant and preoccupied while his sister's case was being investigated. Michael's little sister had just been murdered, for Christ's sakes. Like, she was 12 years old and she was murdered. And he was probably still in shock. He didn't really understand what was going on, why he was getting questioned, didn't understand why his sister was killed, didn't know what in the world was going on. According to the videos of his interview, it was put in Michael's file that Michael was extremely distraught. It's quite possible that police just really wanted to very badly close this case, so that they started to paint this picture, so to say, with Michael as the killer and their prime suspect. So they started to create this whole imaginary timeline of him murdering his sister, and during the interviews with Michael, the detectives acted absolutely disgusting towards him, and it was in a way that had me so infuriated that I cannot even put it into words. Like, I'm gonna have to link the video down below because it's just too much for me to have to put in here, but it's just so intense and it's so horrible and disgusting to watch that it just made me almost sick to my stomach. The police, they then lied to Michael that they found DNA at the crime scene that was his, which is absolutely bullshit because they didn't find any DNA at this point. They hadn't even searched for it. The police even had the balls to tell Michael to his face that his own family thought that he murdered Stephanie and that they all hated him for it. And this was complete bullshit because his parents and Shannon never stated to police that they felt this way. They never would have said that about Michael. But the police are saying that this happened, and it was just, it's ridiculous that they would. So the detectives then tell Michael that he failed this truth analyzer test, which wasn't even a real polygraph test, but was an actual voice recorder. They basically recorded his voice during a conversation that they had with him, and then told him he failed it, which was bullshit. I'm now going to add the real questions of the interrogation session between the detectives and Michael, but before then, I'm going to tell you that the detectives also had the nerve to tell Michael that he failed that test because he failed that test, he had killed his sister. But let me get into the interrogation. So, I'm going to tell you who is Michael. I'm going to tell you the questions. So, let's start. So, the first question. Well, where do you think? If someone was going to die from being stabbed, where would they be stabbed? Michael. In the head. Okay, where else? Is that the only place? Stomach? I don't know. The chest? Why would they die from being stabbed in the stomach? Eventually. Eventually? Yeah. Why? They'd bleed to death, is what Michael said. Would they? I guess. I don't really know. And this was the conversation of the truth test, I should say. It was ridiculous. So I'm sure you can guess which ones was Michael and which ones was not. So when the police show him the results from the truth test, it stated that Michael had lied whenever he was asked, do you know what happened to your sister? And do you know who took Stephanie's life? The detective that had been interviewing him claimed that when he looked at Michael, it looked like that Michael inside was just ready to burst. And the detective tells Michael that nobody can bring Stephanie back. Which, like, why in the hell would you tell that to a 14-year-old boy who is grieving the death of his little sister? No one can bring her back. That's just gonna make him feel even worse and even more shitty. Like, oh my god, why would you say that? So Michael, he starts to cry harder, obviously, because he's very distraught and upset. And he tells them, I just don't know what to do anymore. This same detective then asks Michael how he would react if they found his hair in Stephanie's hand. For which Michael responds, I would have a complete mental breakdown. Now I'm going to add that he had just been sobbing during the entire interview and the whole video of the interrogation. And this detective is just upsetting him even more. And it's just so awful to watch. It's so awful. The detective asks Michael if that could have happened, like what he brought up. And he goes, no, not that I could think of. And just when it seemed like the case could not get any more crazy, the detectives accuse poor Michael, who is clearly devastated and just grieving over the loss of his little sister, that he had blacked out and killed his sister in a fit of, what is it, like, split personality disorder rage. It's so ridiculous. So the detective, like I said, they accused him of that. And Michael, he stated that he wanted to personally find whomever had killed Stephanie. And he stated that he loved his sister deeply. And he was sobbing as he's saying this. So after several more hours of interrogation, which was done without the parents' consent, Michael tells police that he had killed Stephanie. I know what you all are thinking. Boom, case closed. Stephanie's murder is solved because Michael just admitted it. Wrong. Wrong, wrong. Not even close. This shit's about to get even more wild. Let me just tell you what. So authorities, they then... I'm laughing because it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. They then try to convince Michael that he had an undiagnosed split personality disorder with a good Michael and a bad Michael. And the bad Michael was the one that killed Stephanie, and the good Michael got pushed away. These investigators that were actually questioning him and telling him this, they weren't even skilled psychiatrists. They had no idea what the hell they were talking about. They were just telling him this. and they had absolutely no right to tell him that or even treat him that way. Police are actually starting to scare the crap out of this kid and asked him what his biggest fear was. For him to, which he responded that there was someone living in him that was dark and evil. They even went so far as to tell him if he had done this to Stephanie, he could do this to the rest of the family, and that he was probably plotting a murder in his sleep to kill the rest of his family. It was the most ridiculous shit I've ever heard in my life. It was ridiculous. So, the worst part is how Michael just felt so ganged up by the police that he just ultimately confesses, saying, you know what, it was me. They had no evidence and no crime details to even claim that what Michael was saying was true. The fact that he was guilty, he just said it to please the officers. So at this point, they're like, boom, he's guilty. Let's arrest him and charge him for murder. Michael Crowe, like I just said, was ultimately arrested and charged with the murder of his 12-year-old sister, which ultimately devastated the whole family. Remember how I said earlier that authorities had stated and told Michael that they had evidence that he had killed his sister? Yeah, the detectives had actually lied about that. They didn't have any evidence whatsoever that even pointed to Michael as their main suspect. They just wanted a confession out of him. So, once police arrested Michael, they started interviewing Michael's friends at school in hopes to find any type of information that could help them with their story and their ideology that Michael was this insane killer that had a second voice that told him to kill his sister, essentially, making him out to be crazy. He had some friends that lived in a town called Oceanside, and these were 15-year-old Joshua and 15-year-old Aaron. The police, they started going to the homes of both boys, and neither of their parents were home, which by then the authorities should not have questioned them, because you're not supposed to question a minor unless an adult is present. But you better make damn sure that those authorities did so anyways. They didn't give a shit about that. They just went ahead and they started questioning the boys. So the detectives found out that a knife that Aaron had owned had actually gone missing. And Aaron had actually a very big collection of medieval knives because the boys enjoyed swordplay. And the detectives, when they arrived back at Joshua's house, they actually find a knife matching the description of the one that Aaron had lost. This was when the police magically assumed that all three boys were in cahoots to murder Stephanie, and that Michael must have been the mastermind behind it all and manipulated his friends into helping him out. The police believed that the knife that they found at Aaron's home was in fact the murder weapon. And there was no fingerprints done, no DNA analysis done to even test the knife to even see if it matched their DNA, to see if they even had Stephanie's DNA, Stephanie's blood on it. Nothing. They just said, oh, that's the murder weapon. They're guilty. Literally like that. It was ridiculous. Police, Police then arrest Joshua in connection with the murder. He was then questioned for 11 hours straight without a lawyer or his parents present from 10 p.m. until 9 a.m. with zero sleep and zero food. This, like I said, this was all done without his parents' permission, his parents' knowledge, and mind you, after being interrogated, Joshua broke and claimed that Aaron had given him the knife to kill Stephanie, which was a complete lie because he wasn't even at the home the night that Stephanie was killed. They weren't even together. They weren't even hanging out with Michael the day that Stephanie was murdered. So he just made this all up because that's what police wanted to hear. The following day, Joshua ended up calling Aaron on a monitored phone call so that police could hear Aaron confessing to giving him Joshua the knife. to kill Stephanie, but this failed because Aaron had no idea what the hell Joshua was talking about. A week later, Joshua was then questioned again by police, and this was done using the Reed technique, same as what was done to Michael. Aaron was then arrested for being involved in the murder of Stephanie. So now, at this point, all 3 boys are now subsequently arrested and charged with the murder of Stephanie. So now I'm going to discuss about what exactly the Reed technique is and how it is used, because y'all better buckle down because this is wild. So the Reed technique was invented by a man named John Reed back in the late 1950s. John worked for a police department, and he was extremely skilled in providing polygraph tests. He believed that if you use psychological tactics to get people who were accused of crimes to confess, that they would confess more often. However, most people believe that this was actually an unethical way of getting people to admit to their crimes, because it caused young people, especially adolescents and children, to falsely confess to crimes that they didn't commit because they felt like they were being targeted. In fact, the very first time this method had actually been used, it was a false confession. The man had been accused of murder at the time and then was later found not guilty. So it was a failed technique anyways. But the police, they still wanted to use this for their interrogation of Michael and everyone, so they were using this Reed technique. It was basically a way to formally accuse people over and over and over again until they confessed, like, yeah, you caught me, I did it. Aaron was arrested later that day at school, and when this all happened, all 3 of the boys' parents were made aware of what truly was going on, because at this point they had no idea what was actually going on, why they were being interrogated, why were they constantly at the police station. So the boys ended up recanting their statements. Ultimately, the parents were pissed, as they should have been pissed. So they were furious at the San Diego police department for their usage of the Reed technique. And all 3 boys ended up recanting their statements. Michael's confession ended up being used as coercion, and he was then told that he would be given leniency, basically saying the court would go easy on him if he just confessed. Both his confession and Aaron's ended up being thrown out because there's literally no evidence of either of the boys that they had killed Stephanie. However, despite all this, the judge for the case decided that all 3 boys were still going to be tried as adults for Stephanie's murder. Witnesses started coming forward from the juvenile correctional facility where Michael was being held at, and they actually claimed that on multiple occasions Michael had told them that he had killed his sister, and they even went so far as to say that he even described how he killed his sister to them. Which was bullshit, by the way. That never happened. The judge then states that if it didn't matter now the confessions were thrown out, because of these statements, they already had enough evidence to prosecute Michael and make him guilty. Police then find out that Michael enjoyed sword play and medieval role play, meaning that he was skilled with a knife along with maiming. Michael even admitted that he was actually even jealous of Stephanie because of just how much more popular she was compared to him. At this point, the boys had been incarcerated for 6 months, and they were awaiting trial, and right before Joshua's trial was supposed to start, there was new information that was released to the public that just put everything on a halt. And wait till y'all hear this. When Stephanie's body had been found, a 28-year-old man named Richard Raymond Tuitt was actually questioned by police about her murder. He was a local homeless man, and he lived in the streets of Escondido. Richard had also been seen in Stephanie's neighborhood the night that she was murdered. So he's prowling around the neighborhood the night that she was murdered. He is one of the local transients. He's considered crazy. Just wait. There's a lot more to it. So, like I said, Richard had actually been seen in the neighborhood that exact night that Stephanie went missing. It had actually been reported to police, the San Diego police, several times that he was trying to break into people's homes. the man named Richard Tuitt, he was actually seen knocking on the doors and windows of people's homes, trying to break in while either very drunk or very high. Richard was said to even have cuts on his hands that seemed like very obvious defense wounds, like someone had been trying to fight him off. And this could possibly even have been from Stephanie herself, because remember, she was stabbed with a knife. She could have been trying to block it and push it back towards him, and he ended up being cut. The police took his clothes to search them, and they ended up actually finding items in his clothing from the Crowe family home. This was not published in the newspapers because the police really wanted to keep the teens as their main suspect, because the man they were looking into, Richard Tuitt, had diagnosed schizophrenia. So because of this diagnosis, police believed that Richard wasn't mentally capable of doing a crime like this. He wasn't mentally there because he had schizophrenia to kill someone, which is bullshit, because I know so many people who have had schizophrenia and have murdered people. Now, I don't know them personally, but I know them through my research. It's ridiculous. So the evidence that Richard had blood on his shirt was then analyzed, and it actually matched Stephanie's DNA. So how could that have happened unless he was the one that committed the murder? I mean, like, it's bullshit. They're basically saying it wasn't him because he wasn't mentally there or whatever, but he's got her blood and DNA on his clothes. I mean, something just isn't adding up there. Like, I just don't know. Maybe people do things differently out in California. I have no idea. The charges against the boys were ultimately dropped, but it was done so in a way that in case they ever needed to charge them again with Stephanie's murder, it could be done so easily. The San Diego County Police were so incredibly embarrassed that they had actually accused these teenage boys of murder that they did not look into Stephanie's case for 2 years. 2 years they did not look into her case. 2 years. Ridiculous. In early 2001, the California State of Justice took over the case, and in May of 2002, Richard is ultimately charged with Stephanie's murder. And just when y'all think that shit's about to get even more crazy, well, listen to this. Listen to this. If you thought that was crazy, wait till you hear what I'm about to say. So, like I said, Richard was in this holding tank, and this was on the first day of the trial, and when everyone was out on lunch, he somehow managed to get himself out of his handcuffs, slip out of the courthouse, and end up on a bus, because he bought a freaking bus ticket, ended up on a bus, and left the whole damn city. Yeah. And this was probably because he knew he was guilty, and he didn't want to stick around to find out. Several hours later, the police finally found Richard, and they gave him even more charges against him besides the murder of Stephanie. So it's just the wildest shit I've ever heard in my life. So according to local residents, Richard had actually knocked on several of the doors and windows of people's homes in that neighborhood, and there was one resident that actually opened up their door, and believe it or not, Richard just walks right in like he owns the place. He just goes, oh, okay, and just walks right in. You know, the person who owned the house is just looking at him like, what the hell is going on? You know, like it was just mind-blowing. She didn't understand what the hell was going on. So he tells the lady living there that he needed to talk to this Tracy woman, and that he wanted to get back at her for what she did to him. Ain't that some shit? So, who is Tracy, you might be asking? Well, police, they still don't know who the hell Tracy is. Tracy could have been someone in his imagination for all we know. He had schizophrenia. Who's to say he was medicated? You know, he could have been anybody. So it was just so weird that he was just going around asking people who Tracy was. Police was then dispatched to the house, and they went to go and search for Richard. And this is when an officer notices the door for the Crowe family home shut. This was the one that was in the garage that led to Stephanie's bedroom. And this was whenever he said that he was going to kill someone. And he literally went into a house. So this bright, wonderful police officer, he tells the other guys that he's with, oh, I couldn't find him anywhere, and I saw the door shut and I just assumed that it was one of the people living there. Sure, Jan, sure. So this was just crazy because he just, like I said, he just assumed that it was just one of the family members that was going into the house, and before leaving the scene, he realized, oh, Richard isn't anywhere. I just saw the door shut. Let me not put two and two together. I don't know where he is. Well, get this. He was in the Crowe home killing Stephanie. In 2004, Richard's murder charges were then dropped to manslaughter, and then he was sent to 13 years in prison. When Richard found out he was guilty, he immediately started to appeal his case. It turns out, because of course, I mean, why everything else has gone wrong, might as well have this go wrong. Of course, something had happened in the case, and a judge had actually made an error with cross-examination. And this was done that involved issues with the DNA evidence. And in 2011, the courts decided to overrule Richard's guilty conviction, overturn it. In 2013, Richard was granted a retrial. Because, of course, at the end of the trial, his attorney stated there were no fingerprints at the time and that Richard had been framed for the crime due to his schizophrenia. That shirt that had Stephanie's blood on it actually had zero evidence of the home, and nor did his shirt have any blood on it before he was even arrested and accused of murdering Stephanie. And just when y'all thought this case could get any worse, okay, I'm about to turn on a light. Just before y'all thought that this could get any worse now, just wait till this. I gotta turn on a light though. Y'all can't really see me. Ugh. So just when y'all thought this couldn't get any worse, y'all, wait till you hear this. So, like I said, at the trial, his attorney stated there were no fingerprints there that had all been planted as fraud DNA evidence to get Richard in trouble, and that his shirt didn't have any blood on it. The defense, however, they stated that Richard, he was actually around the Crowe family home of the night of Stephanie's murder, and that he was seen going into the unlocked door by her room. However, despite all of this, there were no signs of a break-in. I mean, they left the home all unlocked anyway, so of course there's not going to be any signs of a break-in. So, Richard, he had gone into that home, and it's very possible that he could have gone in there and assumed that Stephanie was this Tracy girl. I'm going to say Jessica for a second. Stephanie was this Tracy girl, and he immediately just started to kill her. Just stab, because he was crazy, and he didn't realize that this was not, in fact, Tracy. This was a different girl named Stephanie. So, it just blew my mind. And he was actually quoted saying at the church how he was going to kill Tracy that night. In December of 2013, Richard was found by the courts to be, are you ready for this? Not guilty of Stephanie's murder. This literally frustrates me to no end because it's so obvious that Richard was the one behind all of this. He was the killer. There was so much evidence that pointed to him as being the guilty party that it just blows my mind. Why they would sit there and be like, it's not him. No. It definitely was. Like, oh my gosh. At this point, it just seemed like the Crowe family will never get any justice for what happened to Stephanie, for Stephanie's death, and I absolutely cannot imagine what this family must have felt. The judicial system had absolutely failed this family, and the families of all three of the boys, this includes Michael, had tried to sue the San Diego Police Department. It was stated that this had been done because of how traumatized the boys were, and along with how horrendous their handling of Stephanie's case was. The Crowe family won their lawsuit and was ultimately rewarded $7 million. After this, the courts finally officially ruled all three of the boys to be factually innocent. To this day, in 2022, no one has ever been charged with Stephanie Crowe's murder. I just feel so terrible for this poor little girl. Like, I mean, she just went to bed and she didn't expect anything to happen to her. Someone broke into her house, probably Richard, and killed her for no reason. She was just trying to live her life. Her brother ends up being accused of her murder, being charged and tried for her murder, and he was just in there sleeping as well. He didn't know what the hell was going on. Along with that, you know, this person that may have done this to her, probably Richard, like I said, escaped the law and was able to live a life, and she had to lose hers. And it just frustrates me to no end because it just seemed like the police already had their man and they let him go because of their own stupidity. They could have caught this guy so much earlier if they would have been so focused on Michael and his friends, saying that they killed him, he killed her and got his friends to help out because he was jealous of Stephanie. It just what the hell? Like, it just does not make any sense to me. So it's possible in my mind, like I said, that Stephanie is in heaven with our Lord God and with Jesus Christ right now, and she is watching down on her brother and on her sister and on her parents right now, possibly even the murderer right now. And it just blows my mind. She was probably sitting there up in heaven watching her own brother be accused of what happened to her, knowing damn well that he would never do something like that to her. I mean, he even said in the video clips that he deeply loved her and that he would never want anything like this to happen to her. He was sobbing. He was inconsolable. Like, it was just ridiculous how awful this poor boy was being treated. And the fact that the case has still never been solved and the murderer probably got away with it is just, oh, what the hell? It just blows my mind. It's bullshit, man. So I totally believe, this is my opinion, I totally believe that Richard was guilty. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. He was in the neighborhood. He was seen going into the house. He had his DNA practically like all over Stephanie's stuff, but yet they said he was not guilty. It makes me think that maybe they said he was not guilty on reasons of insanity, or maybe something, oh geez, someone fell outside. Or maybe something else, but like, it does not make any sense to me. I just don't understand it. Like, why would, and the fact that they literally stood there and they had accused these young men and these little, like, teenagers of murdering this poor girl, like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. So, like I said, I feel so horrible for the families involved. I feel so horrible for Michael. I feel horrible in general for Stephanie. Like, what the hell, trying to sleep and then you end up getting killed for no reason. It just doesn't make sense. And please don't be bashing too hard about how her family left their house wide open, because, you know, I understand it's not something that we could do. It's not safe, but it just blows my mind. So let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comment section below of this video. Let me know if you guys think Michael was guilty, if you think his friends were guilty, if you think Richard was guilty, if you think it was someone else. What do you guys think? What's your opinion also on how the police handle this case? Because I'm going to tell you what, I thought the police did a shitty job, and they all should have been fired. I would have sued the police department too if I were their family. I don't blame them one bit for doing that. So, like I said, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!